So we're learning Tractate Shabbos, 10th chapter. The name of the chapter is Amatznia, and we're holding in page 96.
Correct.
So we ended off yesterday speaking about the two different kinds of Rabba Zutre. First statement of Rabba that seemed contradicting each other. The Gemara answered it's not really contradicting that, because he said sealed, covered. We spoke about utensils that are perforated, not perforated. What's the size of the hole? Is a tumor penetrates through it? It's not. If yes or no, so it says like this: sealed cover is effective in blocking tumor until the majority of the container breaks off. Obviously, he said with regard to large earthenware utensils that sealed cover is effective. Rabba Zutre, and the second statement that a pomegranate-sized hole in a small pot already destroys its effectiveness. It's not a pot anymore. He said with regard to small earthenware utensils that it's not considered a pot. So obviously, if it's not considered a pot, it's not makabel tumah. Anything that still considers a kli is makabel tumah, is susceptible to tumah. If it's not, once it's a kli, it's susceptible to tumah. If it's shattered, it's not susceptible to tumah. Right. So he says if there's a seal on top, even though there's holes, it's still makabel tumah with large utensils because they're still effective. They're still containers. Right. With small containers, if they have holes the size of pomegranate seeds, they're no longer considered. He's not considered them utensils anymore. Said with regard to small earthenware utensils that the holes destroys its effectiveness. Amar Ravasi, Shoinim, they teach kli cheres, an earthenware vessel shiur b'chenes mashke. It's prescribed measure enough to take in liquid. V'lo yomru meitzi mashke, and they did not say enough to let out liquid. Elo nyan gista v'lvad, regard to a shard. Mai timer, what is the reason? Why does a hole too small to undo a complete utensil deprive a shard of its utensil status? Amma Mazutra, where Rav Nachman, Mazutra, the son of Rav Nachman, said, because people do not say, bring a shard for a shard. Rather, once a shard is punctured enough for liquid to leak out of it, they discard it. A complete utensil, however, is not discarded because of such a small hole. The Gemara continues to discuss the different sizes of perforations as they affect earthenware vessels. Two Amoraim in the West disagree concerning it. One said enough to let a pomegranate through. And one said that a small root, and you sign. It's a famous statement. One is doing a lot, one is doing less. The most important is to have your intention concentrating on Hashem, whether one gives a lot or gives a little. Yeah. So Amar Avichin Abar Kana Mishmei Rabbi Lezer Kol Klei Cheres earthenware vessels shiur k'meisi zeisim. It's prescribed measure enough to let olives through. Umar Keshisha Brei Rabbi Misam Mishmei Rabbi Lezer. Umar Keshisha, the son of Rabba, concluded the statement in the name of Rabbi Lezer. They earthenware utensil with olive-sized holes are then the same as dung utensils, some utensils, and clay utensils, which are not susceptible to tumor, either under biblical law or under rabbinic law. In regard to a sealed cover, its measure is until the majority of the utensil has broken off. We shall return to you. Hamatznia, Adon Allah Hamatznia.
I have to ask about this. Okay. So we have dung utensils, and clay, which are not susceptible to tumor. So why does it matter about the cover sealed or not sealed for these vessels?
Not in these vessels. In real vessels, it makes a
in
difference.
a glass vessel, in a metal vessel, then it's a problem.
No, so when you have the seal on top, it stops tuma from coming in.
Okay, fine. This stops the tumor this is stopping the tumor from coming in.
Right.
So now I take it over, break it, then tumor goes in, or can go in, makabel the tumor. But that's only for the ones that was originally makabel tumor. But the other ones that's the previous ones, the dung, stone, and clay, that's irrelevant. Okay.
I think if you see number 11 will explain it more. It's more. It says, see Brisa 58 above Mishnah Kelim, earthenware utensils with olive-sized holes are not susceptible to tumor because they're not considered utensils anymore.
Okay.
Even if they were designated for
Pomegranates.
This teaching is in dispute with Rabba, who ruled above in 95b that a utensil with an olive-sized hole can still be considered a utensil in regard to pomegranate if it was designated for pomegranates. According to the view, the Mishnah in Kelim, which gives a pomegranate-sized hole as a measure, refers only to wood utensils, whereas according to Rava, it can refer to even earthenware utensils.
Okay.
But the point is like this: that's what you have to keep in mind. Think about tuma. It's when you have generally when you have a vessel, it's susceptible to tuma. If it's considered a vessel, you call it a kli. How long would you call this a cup? Like this is a cup. For how long would you call it a cup? As long as it's a cup. The moment that it has holes, you can't really call it a cup anymore.
Right.
What depends what holes, what type of a hole does it have? It has big holes, small holes. If it's shattered, it's not shattered.
It has a crack even. It's
Right.
No good. Okay. Hazorik.
We're starting a new Mishnah. If one throws an object from a private domain to a public domain, from a public domain to a private domain, he is liable. From private domain to another private domain, and there is a public domain in between. Rabbi Akiva mechayev chacham peitur. This is interesting because it's going back to what we learned in the beginning. Right, that we start a Masechta with someone who transfers from one Rishus to another Rishus. In previous chapters, the Tana delineated the laws governing transferring by carrying. So that's the difference, you see? It tells you. The difference between the previous chapters and now is that now we're speaking about throwing. Before we spoke about transferring.
Right.
There's a big difference. So he now proceeds to delineate the laws of transfer by throwing and handing over. So if one throws an object from a private domain to a public domain on Shabbos, or vice versa, public to private, chayav is liable. From private to private, and the public is in the middle. So, let's say this is a skyscraper and this is a skyscraper, right? And I have a balcony here, and I have a balcony here, and over here is Broadway.
Right.
This is Broadway.
Right.
And I throw something to you, you're catching it. I throw something to your balcony. I'm standing on one balcony in the 20th floor and sending it to your balcony.
Right.
You catch it.
Right.
So it went over public domain.
Yeah.
That's what it means. Private, and public is in the middle. So Rabbi Akiva says he's liable. Sage says he's potter. Is exempt. Two balconies, one opposite the other in public domain. One who hands over or throws an object from this private to the other across the public domain is exempt. If both balconies were in the upper story on the same side of the public domain. Both balconies were in one upper story on the same side of the public domain. So now assume that the buildings are like this, and the balconies are here, and you're transferring. So this is the public domain. I don't know what would be considered under the building. It says, if two balconies were in one upper story on the same side of the public domain, let's see, it's number 7. Both balconies jutted out of the same upper story and were thus on the same side of Reshus Harabim, though separated by an open space.
Oh, I got it. So I'm in the same building, and you're in the next apartment to me, or
Right. That's the. Sometimes the balconies are divided into two, so it transfers from one balcony to the other. But
right.
One is your Reshus and one is mine. So.
Right.
Anyway, so it says, if you do it, or shoto, if you're handing it over, you're liable. And if you're throwing it, you're patul. Because this was the manner of work of the Levim. There would be 2 wagons, one beyond the other in the public domain. They would hand over the tabernacle boards from this wagon to the other. They would not throw the boards, they would hand them over. So that's why the whole idea of throwing, you understand the whole idea of the primary melachos that they were done in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Mishkan, the building of the Mishkan.
Right.
In the building of the Mishkan, they didn't throw the planks, they hand the planks. So that's why the Zorik is like a little bit vague area of whether he's chayav or not.
Right.
Zrika, see, it says right away, Zrika toldo deotzoi. Throwing is a derivative of taking out. It's not taking out directly. Where is taking out? So let's go back. Where is taking out written? Moshe commanded, and they sounded. You see how we're going back to the Mishkan. Moshe commanded and sounded the proclamation in the camp. Moshe, where was he? In the Levite camp, in the Levi. The Levite camp was legally a public domain. All the Levim were there. And he made the proclamation to whom? To Israel. What did he say to them? What was the proclamation? Do not take out and bring materials from your private domain to the public domain of the Levite camp. Don't bring stuff to the Levite camp because your place is private and my place is public. I'm in the Levite camp, so don't bring into the Levite. How do we know that he made the proclamation on Shabbos? Maybe it was on a weekday. Because the melacha was finished. So he said, stop bringing materials. I don't need your materials. It's already, we have enough materials. Right. Maybe that was the reason. Maybe it wasn't Shabbos. We see clearly that there was a point where Moshe said, enough. We have sufficient amount of materials. So how do we know that he said it on Shabbos? Don't bring from your camp to the public domain to the camp of the Levites. So we learned this from Gezerah Shava, that Moshe said, Moshe made the statement not to stop bringing materials to the Levite camp, to Reshus Harabim, because we learned the Gezerah Shava, a scriptural decree. Is it written here in the pasuk? And they sounded a proclamation in the camp. Also, and it is written here in regard to Yom Kippur, and you shall sound a broken blast on the shofar. Also, just as there the pasuk discusses a day of prohibition, Yom Kippur, Afkan b'yom also. So to here, the pasuk Vayaviru kol b'machane va'avarta says same language, same wording, same verbiage. So So it's just over there speaking about Yom Kippur, B'yom Osur, a day of prohibition, the Yom Kippur, Afkan B'yom Osur. So to here, it was a Shabbos. But we have found taking out. Achnoso Menalam. How do we know the bringing in? Take out, I understand. He said, don't take out. But how do I know I'm not allowed to bring something in? Svori. So it's a logical argument. Mik dirishus. Let us see. It is transferring an object from domain to domain that the Torah has prohibited in the pasuk cited above. What difference should there be whether the transfer being done is taking out, or bringing in? What's the difference? However, through logic dictates that the two forms of transfer are legally equivalent. Taking out is the primary labor, whereas bringing in is a derivative labor. Taking out is the primary, and bringing in is the derivative. Having differentiated between a primary labor and a derivative, the Gemara explores the distinction between them. What's the difference? Umikdi, and now, you are liable both cases, taking out or bringing in, for the primary melacha and for the derivative melacha. Both of them you're liable. So why do you call one a primary and one derivative? I told. Why is this one called primary, taking out, and this one bringing in called derivative labor? Nafka mina. The practical outcome of malachos in general being segregated into categories of primary and derivative malachos is the ovid shtei ovids badadode. If one unwittingly performs two different primary labors, even if he performs them together, or two derivatives, each one a derivative of two different of, even if he performs them together, Michayev Tauti is liable to two. Ve'ovid avis soldo didei, whereas if he performs a primary labor and its own derivative together, Lemichayev is liable to only one chatos. So av in a derivative is one chatos, two avis is two chatos, and two derivatives is two chatos, two different derivatives. You get it?
Yeah. So if you started a fire on a log and you carried the log out, you got two chatas.
No, because taking out is one of, and starting a fire is another of.
Right.
But even two toldos, even if you did two toldos, two derivatives of different others,
right,
you're also liable to two.
So flipping on the light, that's a toldos.
Say the derivative of starting a fire could be said that it's directly lighting a fire because you're creating a spark.
Okay, so it's either an av or a toldos.
Yeah.
Okay.
More likely an av. Some say that the Torah says don't start a fire on Shabbos, so they explain why the Torah said, because of the melacha back then it was like a hard thing to do, to start a fire. But obviously it's not true, because the Torah doesn't tell us not to do something because it's difficult.
Right.
So don't do it.
I'm just going through the svara of it all.
Yeah, so Rabbi Lezer, according to Rabbi Lezer, Mechav told him, who obligates a sinner to a separate chatos for a derivative melacha performed alone with the primary melacha. Even though it's the derivative of the primary, you're still liable to two. Amai kol av, amai kol toldo. Why is he calling it av and why is he calling it toldo? They're both the same. Whatever happened in a Mishkan is called av, primary. What happens in which was not significant in the tabernacle is not called primary labor, but rather a derivative of Einami, or another answer, Hach d'chsiva koriyav, labor which is written in the Torah, taking out is called the primary. Right, the l'ksiva kori toldo, and whatever is not written, he calls it toldo, derivative. Oh, this nan. What's the problem with transfer? It says, Azirik Arbam is a case if one throws an object a distance of 4 amis in the public domain against the wall. 4 amis in the public domain against a wall.
No, on public domain form. So, I'm over here, and I'm outside. I'm on the wall outside of here, and I'm throwing a ball from the street.
Listen to this. It says, the Gemara will explain that he throws a sticky object,
Oh yeah, the sticky
such as a
object.
sticky cake or pressed figs,
Yeah.
and it adhered to the wall facing the public domain,
Ah.
and it gets stuck on the wall. There comes a case if one throws an object a distance of 4 amis in the public domain against the wall. Now it's on the wall. Lamala masot tfochim, and it strikes the wall above 10 tfochim from the ground. Okay?
Yeah.
Kezirik ba'avir, it is as though he threw it in the air.
Ah.
Lamato ba'asot tfochim, if it strikes the wall below the 10 tfochim,
Okay.
Kezirik ba'oretz, it is as though he threw it on the ground.
Okay.
Vazirik ba'oretz abam is chayav, and one who throws an object so that it lands on the ground 4 amis away in the public domain is liable. So
Okay.
if you're going into the golf course on Shabbos,
Yeah.
you take the ball and you throw it, and it lands on the ground, you're liable. But if you throw it and somehow it sticks to a tree
Yeah.
above 10 tfochim,
Yeah.
they're not liable according to this.
No, but the ball isn't a sticky thing.
It's not a sticky thing, but I'm saying, let's say it gets stuck in
I
it.
can see through it because if I'm walking here or to shul and the ball comes and I would throw it back to the guy, which I don't, and it would get caught in a tree, then I'm putter. But if it goes,
That's
on-
what he's saying.
All right.
So, from where do we know that one who throws an object a distance of 4 amis in the public domain is liable? For indeed, the weavers of the curtains would throw their needles to each other. Why do weavers need needles? Weavers use a loom for their work rather than needles. Rather, the precedent for throwing 4 amis is that indeed the sewers, those who sew things, of the curtains would throw their needles to each other. But perhaps the sewers would sit close to by one another. They could not sit near one another, for they would then reach and prick one another with needles when drawing them back to tighten the stitches. Granted that they did not sit close by, but perhaps they sat within 4 amis of one another. The precedent for throwing 4 amis is that indeed the weavers of the curtains would throw the shuttle across the width of the curtain. But to some degree he still grabs the shuttle with his hand even after it is thrown. Benisko baso, we learn from the throw during which the last piece of weft thread will unwind from the spool, causing the shuttle to fly free. In that case, the shuttle reaches the end of the 4 amis unattached to the river who threw it. But the shuttle in any case travels in between the 2 panels of warp thread, which is an exempt area. Rather, the precedent for throwing for Amos is that indeed the curtain weavers would throw the spare. They would throw the spare shuttle. They had to those borrowing it from them to work on another loom. Perhaps the various weavers, would sit close by one another, so that the spare shuttle could be simply handed over without being thrown for Amos in the public domain. The Gemara answers, the weavers could not sit near one another, for they would then reach and interfere with one another when pulling the weft thread taut at the edge of the curtain. Perhaps the weavers sat close to one another, but were staggered so that they would not interfere with one another when pulling weft thread taut. The Gemara raises another difficulty with the proposed source. Do the weavers borrow tools from one another altogether? Vatanya Luda taught in a by. So Ishish Melachta Shem Reisim. Pasuk says regarding the construction of the tabernacle, each man from his work that they were doing. From his own work would he do, with his own tools. But he would not do from the work of his fellow. He would not use his fellow craftsman tools. The Gemara raises yet the third difficulty with the proposed source, and furthermore, even if he would grant that the proposed source is valid precedent for throwing for Amos in the public domain. If one who personally carries an object for Amos in public domain, how do we know that it is liable? Whether all manners of transferring an object for Amos in the public domain, whether by means of carrying or throwing, are biblically forbidden through a tradition transmitted orally from Sinai. Having discussed the biblical prohibition against transferring an object for Amos in the public domain, the Gemara discusses biblical passage that might deal with a violation of this prohibition. Mekoshish is the famous story in the Torah about the Mekoshish, the father of Bnei Slofchod, the gatherer.
Oh, right. That's how come he got.
Was a transporter of wood for Amos. He called him Mekoshish. There's a mimer in the Torah Mekoshish. Masnisotano Teleshava. The gatherer was a detacher of wood that was still growing. Detacher of wood that was still growing.
Yeah.
It's not something that he gathered some wood that was off ground, that was detached from the ground. It's still attached to the ground.
Yeah.
Because the word Mekoshish means gatherer, someone who gathers wood. The gatherer was a detacher of wood, still growing. He was a gatherer of detached and scattered wood, not like the opinion of the time.
Worse.
Yeah. What's the difference if he was gathering detached or attached?
Yeah.
I found a hidden scroll in the academy of Bichia, Chosu Bey, and it was written. Isi ben Yehuda says, Avis Melochos 40 chasarachas. The primary labors prohibited on the Shabbos are 40 minus 1. And even if he commits them all, he is liable to only one. Even if he commits them all, he is liable to one. With one awareness. Achas v'suloi, can he mean that he is liable to but one chatos and no more. Vatenan, we'll learn otherwise in the following Mishnah. Always the primary labors prohibited on the Shabbos are 40 minus 1. Rabbinan, we ask concerning the Mishnah, why do you need to tell me the amount? We'll count it them ourselves. We know how to count. If he did them all in one awareness, in one lapse of awareness, he's liable to a separate chatos for each and every labor. So how then can Issa rule that one is liable only to one chatos of performing all of them? Said Issa ben Yehuda stated the following: the primary labors prohibited on the Shabbos are 40 minus 1, but he is not liable for one of them. I.e., of the 39, there is one labor for which there is no penalty of stoning.
Yeah.
Which is it? It says Issa ben Yehuda, however, agrees that one is liable to chatos for each of the 39 melachos, of his melachos, for he does not dispute the teaching of the Mishnah just cited. It is only regard to the death penalty for willful transgression that he maintained that there is one melacha for which there is no death penalty. Did say? So, however, does not specify which of the 39 labors is expected from the death penalty, and it is regarding this question that the dispute concerning the gatherer's sin has practical relevance. You understand whether if it was detached or attached.
This is like they got and you go to the casino. I know they have a wheel, and they spin the wheel, and you win or you lose. So here, you're betting your life.
Right. Russian roulette, right? From his opinion that the gatherer was executed for transporting 4 amos in the public domain, we see that it is clear to Rav Yehuda that one who transports an object 4 amos in the public domain is liable to the death penalty. And from his opinion that the gatherer was executed for detaching wood, we see that it is clear to the Tana of the Brisa that one who detaches a going object is liable to the death penalty. From his opinion that the gatherer was executed for gathering together wood, we see that it is clear to Rav Acha, the son of Rav Yaakov, one who gathers together is liable to the death penalty. One master holds the death penalty for this labor, at any rate, is not in question. And the other master holds that the death penalty for this other labor, at any rate, is not in question. Who was the Mekeshes? Who was the gatherer? Was Slofchad. The Israelites were in the wilderness and they found a man gathering wood on the Shabbos day. Right, the book of Numbers 15:32.
I think it's in this week's Parsha, the story.
So, afterward it says, Avinu Meso Meidbo. Further, it states our father died in the wilderness. The expression in the wilderness used in both psukim. Establish a gzera shava midbar and never midbar. Malan Slofchot of Kan Slofchot. Just there, the second pasuk, the reference is to Slofchot. So to here, in the first verse, the reference is to Slofchot. Rabbi Akiva, these are the words of Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said to him, Akiva ben kach u ben kach ata osi liten sadin. Akiva, either way, you are destined to give an accounting for what you have just expounded. Why? Im kitvarecho, if it is indeed true, as you state, that the gatherer was Slofchot, you have sinned because the Torah concealed it and you revealed it. Vim lav, and if you are not correct in your identification of tzlof chodesh together, atamitzi lazales tzaddik, then you are guilty of maligning, maligning that righteous man. You're saying that tzlof chodesh is the mekashis, and maybe it's not. Why? So, if you are correct, the Torah concealed it, and you're revealing it. So, Rabbi Yehuda Mesera says it's wrong. And if you are not correct, it's also wrong.
Well, his daughters, in 61, the daughters didn't even admit that he wasn't completely righteous, but he died of his own sin.
Yeah.
He wasn't looking for trouble.
Yeah, we'll continue,
Like
but
Korah.
tomorrow.